Are you a 10x engineer? Have you worked with a 10x engineer? Do you know what a 10x engineer is? Do you think 10x engineers really exist? And if not, do you think it's helpful that we talk about them so much? My argument is that there isn't really such a thing as a 10x engineer, and that focusing so much on this idea, wanting to hire 10x engineers, wanting to make them happy, hold them up as a shining example to everyone else, all of that is toxic. So why do I say this? I'm not making some kind of anti-elitism argument, and I'm not claiming that everyone is equally competent, because that's just obviously not true. Some engineers are indeed a lot better than some other engineers, but I've got 5 main issues with this 10x engineer meme. First, by talking about 10x engineers, we're implying that some engineer is 10 times more productive than all the other engineers in the company, or maybe 10 times more productive than 90% of the other engineers. In other words, we're suggesting that most engineers cluster around some relatively low level of productivity, and a tiny number of special magical people are able to be 10 times as productive as all the rest of them. And it should be obvious that this just isn't true. In reality, it's very likely to be more of a normal distribution, or something like that. So you'll have some very productive engineers, some very unproductive engineers, and most people somewhere in the middle doing great. So maybe the best engineer is 10 times as productive as the worst engineer, but that probably isn't saying very much. Okay, the second issue I have, what do we even mean by 10x? 10 times what? 10 times as many lines of code written per day? 10 times as many problems solved per week? 10 times as much sheer brilliance? I'm being a little bit unfair here, because I'm implying that it is not possible to tell whether one engineer is more productive than another, or just better at engineering. In reality, you can, of course, to some extent, but it is a very complex mix of things. The best engineers don't necessarily write the most lines of code or fix the most bugs or whatever other metric you might have. The best engineers are the ones that are really good at communicating with their peers and with stakeholders, that write good documentation, that know how to prioritize well and how to estimate effectively, that make new team members feel welcome and part of the team, and so on and so on and so on. So if we're saying this engineer is 10 times better than that other engineer, and our measure is just some purely technical metric that we're measuring, then I think we're missing the point of what a software engineer is entirely. My third issue, if we do mean something purely technical, like lines of code, and I think this is often what we mean, then this almost always comes at a cost. Is the code well covered by tests? Is it readable and maintainable by others? Is the code actually quite buggy? Or, as per my previous point, are they not good at making their teammates feel included? Are they one of those lone wolves that thinks it's a good idea to rewrite some central component over the weekend without checking with anyone else whether this is a good idea or not, or thinking about what the implications might be? In short, producing a lot of code or solving a lot of problems or whatever else is not a good thing in itself if that person is also making life harder for their current colleagues or even future collaborators who might want to be able to use or read their code. My fourth issue is the most important one. When we call one engineer a 10x engineer, we're telling all their colleagues that they are 10 times worse than this 10xer, worth 1/10 of them. Of course, we do want ways to give engineers feedback, ways of letting them know whether they are living up to expectations or not, but simply pointing to one amazing colleague and putting them on the 10x pedestal is not very motivating for anyone else. And then there's the more common situation in which a team believes something like, if only we had a 10x engineer, one of those magical beings, we'd be able to do so much better. That team believes that all of its members are 10 times worse or 10 times less productive than some mythological creature called a 10x engineer. Imagine how demoralizing it must feel to be part of that team, particularly if it's the team's leader that keeps talking about 10x engineers. Finally, and very related to my previous issue, there's the effect on leaders. If you're a leader and you believe in the myth of the 10x engineer, it's highly likely that you don't think you have one in your team, because they don't exist. And that means you probably think your team isn't as good as it could be or should be. And that, in turn, probably means that when you're recruiting into your team, you're constantly searching for this unicorn, some magical being that's 10 times better than everyone else. Even if it's just a kind of lightly held belief, even if you don't talk proactively about it, but it's kind of there deep down inside you, it can still affect the way you perceive the engineers in your team. And by the way, these mythological beasts that I'm calling 10x engineers go by a variety of other names. They can be called superstars, monsters, A-players, ninjas, wizards, gurus, whatever. It's all the same. Putting one person or a hypothetical but basically non-existent person up on a pedestal can be an excuse for bad behavior for that person if they actually exist, but it also tells everyone else that they're just not up to scratch. And just think about that. If you're not a 10x engineer, it's not like you can just progressively work your way up there. You've been an engineer for some years and you're not yet a 10x engineer. How long is it going to take you to get there? Maybe 30 years, or maybe you'll never get there. How demoralizing. In reality, of course, you will never get there because there is no such thing as a 10x engineer. But the more we perpetuate the myth, the more people feel like they have this impossible and unnecessary hill to climb. So instead of thinking in terms of 10x engineers, think about the great things your team members actually do. Praise the good things, even if they're small. Say thank you. Highlight what you appreciate in their work. Do that with everyone. You do need to balance this, of course, with the right kinds of constructive feedback. Otherwise, people will never grow. But people do need recognition and praise, and their manager is the one person they should be able to count on to get that from. My problem with the 10x engineer is closely related to another idea that I used to believe in but have since rejected, the shit to value ratio. To find out what this is and why I've turned my back on it, check out the video that's on screen now. And let me know in the comments what you think about the 10x engineer. Have I got this all wrong? Are you in fact a 10x engineer? Do you know one? I'd love to hear about your experiences. Bye. See you soon.